20 things we could do in the 1980s that are gone forever. Ever stop to wonder what daily life was like before smartphones and endless streaming services? The 1980s were filled with peculiar habits, long-forgotten gadgets, and unique traditions that we'll never experience again, from foil-wrapped snacks to ashtrays on airplanes. This trip down memory lane might just surprise you. Let's revisit some of the things we did back when life felt a little simpler, a lot more hands-on, and definitely less digital. Big box TVs, the antenna adventure. There was a time when watching TV wasn't just about clicking a remote and instantly accessing a world of content. Back before cable became ubiquitous and streaming was just a pipe dream, we were at the mercy of good old rabbit ears. Remember those? Two skinny antennas perched precariously on top of the TV, begging to be adjusted just so to catch a clear signal. You'd twist and turn those things, sometimes wrapping them in aluminum foil, hoping for a bit of high-tech magic to cut through the static. And for the truly dedicated TV aficionados, a massive metal antenna on the roof was the ultimate signal booster. You'd just have to hope a strong gust of wind didn't knock it out of alignment. Then the whole family would be yelling, "I can't see anything, go fix the antenna." And let's not forget the RF modulator. If you wanted to watch a movie on your VCR, and who didn't, you had to connect this mysterious little black box between the player and your TV. Flip the switch, tune the TV to the right channel, usually channel 3 or 4, and pray everything synced up properly. It sounds like a major hassle now, but back then that was just how it worked. It was part of the ritual. And who could forget the classic TV slap? When the screen got fuzzy or the sound cut out, a quick smack to the side of the set often brought it right back. Why did it work? Nobody really knew, but it felt like magic. It was a primal, almost violent solution to our technological woes. Now we have sleek flat screens and endless streaming options at our fingertips. But there's a certain charm in remembering a time when watching TV felt more like an adventure, a challenge to be overcome. Rotary phones, the sound of connection. Telephones have come a long way, haven't they? These days, almost everyone has a smartphone tucked away in their pocket, offering instant communication with the world. But not too long ago, the phone was a fixture in the house, usually sitting prominently on a table or hanging on the wall. And if you grew up in that era, you probably remember the rotary phone, the one where you had to stick your finger in a hole and spin the dial for every single number. It wasn't fast, especially when you were calling a number with a lot of nines and zeros, but there was something undeniably satisfying about the click, click, click as the dial spun back into place. It forced you to slow down, to be deliberate in your communication. Later came the push-button phones, and if you were really lucky, the cordless kind that let you walk around the house while you talked, until the battery died, of course. But even those more modern phones had their quirks. Remember the coiled cords? No matter how careful you were, they'd always end up in a hopelessly tangled mess, a physical representation of the complexities of communication. And back then, there was no contact list, no digital address book to rely on. If you didn't know someone's number by heart, you had to flip through a phone book, a massive heavy tome delivered annually, or pull out that little handwritten address book, carefully updated with every new acquaintance. And let's not forget long-distance calls. Calling someone out of town used to cost real money, so those calls were short and sweet. You got straight to the point, said what you needed to say, and hung up before the charges piled up. Today, we talk across the globe without thinking twice. No cords, no spinning dials, no extra charges. What a transformation. Smoking on airplanes, a hazy memory. It might seem absolutely wild today, but not too long ago, smoking was allowed almost everywhere, even in places that would make us cringe now. Back in the early 80s and before, lighting up a cigarette in a restaurant, a grocery store, or even inside an office was totally normal. Nobody batted an eye. It was just part of the culture. But perhaps the most unbelievable part, people smoked on airplanes. Yes, on the plane, 30,000 feet in the air. Commercial jets actually had built-in ashtrays right there in the armrest. Flight attendants would casually offer coffee, snacks, and a friendly reminder to extinguish your cigarette before landing. And the pilots, they weren't left out. The captain himself could light up in the cockpit during the flight. After all, nobody wanted him getting jittery from nicotine withdrawal mid-flight. The cabin would fill with that unmistakable smoky haze, a thick cloud that permeated everything. And somehow we all just accepted it. Families with kids, business travelers, elderly folks. Everyone sat together sharing that recycled, smoky air. It's a far cry from the strict no-smoking rules we have today. Looking back, it's amazing how much has changed. Now, smoking on a plane is unthinkable and illegal, but for those who lived it, it was just another part of flying. It's hard to believe that now the only smoke you may see on a plane is the smoke coming from someone's ears if they are having a hard time. Milk cartons with missing kids, a sobering sight. Remember when milk came in cardboard cartons, not plastic jugs? And not just any cartons, those half-gallon ones you'd pull from the fridge with that little folded spout on top. But it wasn't just about the milk. On the side of so many of those cartons, there was something a lot heavier, a lot more unsettling. A photo and a name under the words, "Have you seen me?" These were missing children, and this was one of the main ways the public learned about them. You'd be sitting at the breakfast table pouring milk over your cereal and suddenly be face to face with a child who had vanished. It was a powerful, sobering message that stuck with you. This campaign started in the 1980s and quickly became part of everyday life. It made missing kids feel real, and it gave families hope that someone might recognize a face, that someone out there might have information. Nowadays, we have Amber Alerts, social media, and 24-hour news cycles, all dedicated to spreading information about missing persons. But back then, a milk carton was the only platform some of these children had. That image of a missing child next to your morning toast? It's something you don't forget. A different time and a different kind of awareness. Full-service gas stations and leaded fuel, a different kind of fill-up. Think back to a time when pumping gas wasn't a do-it-yourself chore. You'd pull up to a station, roll down your window, and someone would be right there to help. They'd pump your gas, wash your windshield, check the oil, and you didn't have to lift a finger. Full-service gas stations were the norm, not the exception. It felt like a bit of luxury, even if you were just filling up the family sedan. You'd be able to ask them to check the tire pressure or other questions while you stayed inside, away from the elements. And the fuel? That was leaded gasoline. Yep, we used to fill our cars with gas that had lead in it. It wasn't just common, it was standard. Back then, no one talked about the health risks or the environmental impact. It wasn't until years later that regulations phased it out, and unleaded fuel became the law of the land. But for those who remember, leaded gas had its own smell, its own sound. Cars ran a little differently back then. And here's 55 that the radio, the government, and for today, it was we'd flip. In the early, there was, but those, the Sunday, and then rain, but for the tons of but then our chicken pot, when a kid, let your other times, if a parent didn't want to bring their child, they would go visit the sick kid, touch a few things, and then come home and pass it along through close contact. As odd as it sounds today, this was a planned effort. Parents wanted to time it right. Definitely not during Christmas break, family vacations, or school exams. These days, we have vaccines that make chickenpox rare and mild, but back then, this was just how it was done. Strange little chapter in parenting history. Messy, itchy, but practical in its own way. Boredom before screens, the art of doing nothing. Growing up in the early 80s or earlier meant one thing was guaranteed, boredom, and not the "I've watched everything on Netflix" kind of boredom. We're talking real old school, sit around and stare at the wall boredom. When you went shopping with your parents, there were no tablets, no cell phones, and definitely no earbuds playing your favorite tunes. You just tagged along, wandered the aisles, and maybe poked at stuff you weren't supposed to touch. At the doctor's or dentist's office, it wasn't any better. There were no TVs blasting cartoons, no iPads loaded with games, just you, a row of chairs, and the sound of soft, slow elevator music playing overhead. If you were lucky, and I mean really lucky, there might be a copy of Highlights magazine on the waiting room table, but chances were someone else had already circled the hidden pictures and solved the puzzles, leaving you with the leftovers, and yet somehow we survived. That boredom sparked imagination. It taught us patience. We daydreamed, people-watched, or counted ceiling tiles. Today's kids might have endless entertainment at their fingertips, but there was something oddly special about having nothing to do and learning to make your own fun. Scented soaps and carpet. Fresh, the smell of clean. If you lived through the 80s, then you know we were serious about keeping our homes clean and smelling fresh. Vacuums back then were big, loud, and had those puffed out cloth bags that would heat up and give off a warm, dusty scent as soon as you turned them on. And nothing said clean house like sprinkling a generous layer of carpet fresh on the rug before vacuuming. It gave the room a much nicer smell, until, of course, the vacuum bag exploded mid-clean. Then it was clouds of dust and chaos everywhere. To keep the house smelling good between cleanings, there were potpourri warmers sitting in corners or plugged into outlets. They filled the air with floral or cinnamon scents. But after a while, the goo inside would turn into a sticky mess that no one wanted to clean. If that didn't cut it, incense sticks were another option. You'd light one up to overpower lingering food smells or cigarette smoke, which was common in many homes back then. And who could forget the decorative soaps in the bathroom? These fancy little flowers and shell-shaped soaps look so nice in a glass bowl, but don't even think about using them. They were strictly for looks. Touching them was practically a crime in Mom's house. 1-800-CARTOON. Hotlines, dialing up the fun. Back in the 80s, Saturday morning cartoons were already exciting. But then came those irresistible commercials. Call now to talk to your favorite cartoon character. Suddenly, kids everywhere were begging to call 1-800-NUMBERS to chat with He-Man, Garfield, or the Ninja Turtles. The ads always said, "Ask your parents' permission." But come on, what kid actually did that? You'd sneak off to the kitchen phone, dial the number, and wait for the magic to happen. Sometimes it was a pre-recorded message. Other times you'd get stuck in some loop of silly voices. Either way, it was thrilling. Until the phone bill showed up. Those calls weren't free. Some charged by the minute, and the longer you stayed on, the more expensive it got. Parents were not amused when they discovered a surprise charge for a conversation their kid had with a talking cartoon. It was one of the sneakier marketing tactics of the era, and it worked like a charm. Kids got a dose of fun, and parents got a dose of reality right there in the bill. Today, it's almost unthinkable. But back then, it was just another part of growing up in the wild, weird world of the 80s. Be honest now. Did you ever sneak a call to one of those cartoon hotlines and get busted when the phone bill came in? Living room staples of the 1980s, a trip down memory lane. Step into any typical living room from the 1980s, and you'd find a treasure trove of iconic home decor and gadgets that defined the decade. First up, the old wooden console television. These weren't just TVs, they were furniture. Big, bulky, and heavy enough to throw your back out if you dared to move them, but they were the heart of the living room, where families gathered to watch primetime shows, Saturday morning cartoons, or late-night movies. Metal TV trays were another must-have, perfect for those nights when dinner was more about convenience than the dining table. You'd pull one out, set it up in front of the TV, and enjoy your meal with your favorite sitcom. Some folks slid them under the couch, while others proudly displayed them on a special rack in the corner. And let's talk about the clapper. Clap on, clap off. It sounded silly, but deep down we all wanted one. Just a clap and your lamp turned off. That was high-tech living. Living rooms were also filled with shiny brass decor, lamps, plant stands, wall art. But keeping it polished was a full-time job. And don't forget ceramic figurines. Whether it was a painted cat or a DIY project from the craft store, if you made it, it went straight into the living room, on display like a prized trophy. Foil-wrapped Hostess ding-dongs, a taste of nostalgia. If you were a kid in the 1980s, you know there was something special about Hostess ding-dongs. And no, we're not talking about the ones wrapped in plastic like today. We mean the ones in shiny foil. Just peeling back that metallic wrapper made you feel like you were opening a little treasure. There was a chill to them, like they had just come out of the fridge, and the chocolate coating seemed richer, the cake fluffier. Was it really better, or was it just childhood magic? Who knows? But we swear it made a difference. These little treats were a staple in lunchboxes and after-school snack time. You'd trade a fruit cup for one in a heartbeat. There was no fancy branding or organic this and that. Just good old chocolate cake, creamy filling, and that familiar foil that crinkled just right. They didn't need a rebrand. They were perfect as they were. Looking back, it's not just the taste we remember. It's the feeling. That moment of excitement when you opened one, The comfort of a familiar treat, and the simplicity of being a kid with a sweet tooth in a foil-wrapped world. The erasable pen, a promise unfulfilled. Back in the 80s, the erasable pen sounded like a dream come true. Write in ink, but erase your mistakes like a pencil. Sign us up. Every kid wanted one in their pencil case, and adults thought it was a sleek new upgrade for everyday writing. But the reality? Let's just say it didn't quite live up to the hype. The ink was weird, sort of waxy and dull, and while the eraser could fade it a little, it didn't really erase clean. Most of the time, you just smeared the page or wore a hole straight through it from scrubbing so hard. Instead of neat corrections, you were left with a mess of paper fibers and ghost letters that never truly disappeared. It was more frustrating than helpful. Still, those pens were everywhere. Commercials made them look magical, and we all bought into the hype. But ask anyone who used them, they were mostly good for doodling or writing something you didn't mind messing up. It was one of those classic 80s inventions that promised the world but didn't quite deliver. A clever idea, sure, but not exactly the school supply revolution we hoped for. So tell me, if you could bring one thing back from the 80s, what would it be? Let us know in the comments. The painful truth about the epilady: beauty is pain. In the wild world of these infomercials, few products were as unforgettable or as deceiving as the epilady hair removal device. Marketed as the ultimate solution for smooth, hair-free legs without razors or messy creams, the epilady was everywhere. Women across the country were sold on the promise of one quick swipe and voila, no more shaving. The commercials made it look effortless, like a miracle gadget straight out of the future, but the reality, ouch! What they didn't show was just how painful it really was. The epilady didn't gently remove hair, it ripped it out from the root. No numbing cream, no warning, just full-on yank. And if that wasn't bad enough, many users ended up with red, irritated skin and a battlefield of ingrown hairs. It was supposed to be about beauty and convenience, but it felt more like torture. Still, people kept buying it. After all, in the 80s, if a product was on TV, we believed it had to work. The epilady lady might have smiled through those commercials, but behind the scenes, a whole generation of women learned a very painful lesson about trusting late-night TV promises, smoking in public spaces, a world engulfed in smoke. It's hard to imagine now, but there was a time when lighting up a cigarette just about anywhere was totally normal. Back in the early 80s and before, smoking wasn't just accepted in public spaces, it was expected. People smoked in restaurants, grocery stores, office buildings, and even on airplanes. Picture this: you're boarding a commercial flight, and instead of turning off your devices, you're settling into your seat next to an ashtray built right into the armrest. Passengers puffed away in their seats, and yes, even the pilot could light up in the cockpit. Nobody batted an eye. In fact, some folks probably figured it was better to let the captain smoke than risk him getting irritable at 30,000 feet. That carefree attitude didn't last forever. As research started revealing the dangers of secondhand smoke and the addictive nature of nicotine, public perception began to shift. It wasn't easy. Many smokers resisted change, but gradually smoking bans took hold. First, it was schools, then offices, and eventually even bars and restaurants. Today, we see designated smoking areas tucked away outside of buildings, a far cry from the smoke-filled spaces of the past. This change didn't happen overnight. It took decades of public health campaigns, scientific studies, and a society willing to rethink old habits. The transformation shows just how far we've come in creating healthier environments and how powerful informed awareness can be. Showbiz pizza and the magic of tokens, a kid's paradise. If you grew up in the 80s, going to Showbiz Pizza was the event. It wasn't just pizza, it was a full-on sensory overload that lit up your imagination. The place was packed with blinking arcade machines, whirring ticket counters, music blasting from every direction, and of course the legendary animatronic band, the Rock-a-Fire Explosion. Those robotic animals sang, danced, sort of, and made every birthday feel like a front-row concert. But let's talk about the real currency of showbiz, the tokens. Not just coins, gold-colored tokens that felt like you were holding treasure. You'd beg your parents for a few more, then rush to your favorite game to win as many tickets as humanly possible. Skee-ball, whack-a-mole, racing games, you name it, we played it. Then came the ticket counter, where you'd proudly trade in your crumpled, sweaty handful of tickets for a prize. Or maybe you only had enough for a plastic spider ring or a single Laffy Taffy, but to us that felt like hitting the jackpot. It wasn't just a meal or a play area, it was a magical place where kids ruled the world for a day, and we had no idea how lucky we were to live it. And despite the gimmicks and growing pains, the 80s gave us unforgettable memories, bold style, and a way of life that just doesn't exist anymore. From Saturday morning cartoons to full-service gas stations, it was a one-of-a-kind decade. What do you miss most about the 80s? Drop your favorite memory in the comments. And as always, thanks so much for watching.